reading, but I think it's a very good chapter, actually. And what else? Let's see. Well, also this week we're supposed to a cargo chapter called Governing Structures, page 92 to 112. Okay, I spent too much time on this, but this is this chapter, Governing Structures, chapter 5. This gives you sort of an overview of the political macro level in Japan. Okay, and for example, on page 98, 99, he has a whole chart, Japanese government organization. Okay, it seems a little maybe dry and boring at first when you look at something like this, because you say, well, all modern political systems have something like this. You know, is there anything particularly interesting about it? Well, I mean, yes, for different reasons. I mean, for one thing, when you look at that, it gives you an idea of what the political establishment or the political elites, what they believe is important when it comes to governing, trying to standardize, trying to categorize, bureaucratize, classify people, what they think is important. And if you compare the Japanese, if you compare the structure of their polity to that of other modern national states, you'll actually see a lot of differences. You see a lot of differences. I mean, well, most of us I think are familiar with the U.S. and there's actually some very important differences. I mean, for one thing, Japan is not a federated system, right, like the U.S. It's a very centralized system, similar to France. Right? They don't have departments; they have ministries instead. The implication is that ministries actually have more power. Where in the United States, in theory, depending on what you're talking about, things are much more decentralized at the state level. We have that big debate in American political history. How do you balance central with state powers? They don't have that debate in Japan. They don't have states. Right? Most places don't have states. So Japan is maybe a little more typical that way. Okay. In any case, and you have another assignment coming up on macro micro, so I'm sure you've seen this already, but this is a good place to look if you need more ideas for your next example. Okay? You just pick out all these ministries. They all have their websites in English and Japanese. A long time ago when I started to study these things, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have websites. Right? When you wanted this type of information, what a ministry is up to, you have to go in person. Right? Either, well, to a sort of a special bookstore where you can purchase this big bookstore, a government publication house where they would put out all these, anything you wanted to know, all these documents and white paper surveys, something like that. You had to go through all these documents in Japanese, try to figure out what they were up to. How were they trying to manage, govern the society? Now it's a lot easier. You don't have to go to Japan. And it's in English. I think, well, it depends. I think each ministry might be a little bit different. But usually they have, maybe it's a watered down version, but they'll have probably some information in English. It makes research a bit easier. But in any case, so what else does he talk about in this chapter? Now he talks about, on page 100, local governments. You could say local government is sort of micro level, maybe, depending on how you want to do it. Some people might say, no, it's still macro. It's up to you. But just to let you know, that's also a big concern. By the way, there are 47 prefectures in Japan. And then this is very important on page 103. He talks about bureaucracy and their bureaucratic dominance debate. Okay, this debate that they have in Japan. It's a debate we should probably have in the American system. We look at things quite differently. We tend to think that bureaucracies and departments and government agencies are just like big machines. They run themselves. You hire civil servants, and it's the politicians who matter, and the elections and things like that. So it's very important important to put the right politician into power, and then they sort of turn on the machine, they turn on these departments, like the bureaucratic mechanics. That's how Americans tend to look at things, usually. Japan, they don't look at things that way. In Japan, the idea is that politicians don't really matter. Politicians are corrupt, kind of clownish, get in trouble, scandal-ridden. One person can't do much anyways to change the system. What does matter are the bureaucrats, the ministries. That's where the action is. If you want to understand how policies are made, that's where you should be looking. Okay, and Japan, anytime they'd have a new cabinet, a new prime minister, form a new cabinet, in the newspapers, they would publish the new heads of the ministries, the ministers, and give a background, what school they went to, and really get into it. Because from the Japanese point of view, those are the people who are important, not the politicians. That's a bit of an exaggeration, my account. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration. But in any case, just to make the point how the political atmosphere in Japan is different, at least compared to the U.S. Okay. Well, in any case, so that's, just to repeat, he talks about bureaucracy and the bureaucratic dominance debate. That's important to know about. And he talks about the policy process. All right. Now, there's this, a lot of political scientists come up with these phrases or terms. They try to capture what Japan is all about. One of them, a couple of people came up with this idea of pattern pluralism. Okay, and what's that about? A strong government and bureaucracy. Okay, rather than strong politicians, the bureaucracy is what matters. Blurred boundaries between state and society. What does that mean? Blurred boundaries between state and society. Well, the issue there, again, this is not a poli-sci course, but we do look at some political anthropology, but that concerns the issue of what's called civil society. And the idea, in a robust, healthy democracy, you have a strong civil society because it acts as a buffer between the family, individuals, versus the state. And in authoritarian systems or dictatorships, you get rid of civil society, or you force all groups to be directly connected somehow to the state. And people say, what's so special about American democracy or American politics? Well, it's because we can vote, and because we have constitutional rights and things like that. But I don't think that's true. I don't think it has anything to do with voting. I think it has to do with, we have a very robust civil society, right? Groups that are layered between the state and the private individual and the family. That's what's special about it compared to other places. That's what's special about American society. So the question is, does Japan, as a democracy, do they have a civil society? Do they have a bunch of groups protecting individuals from the state? What's an example of civil society? In fact, in that document that you're supposed to print out, macro, micro, I think there's a little, I have that diagram, those big circles. I think you get a sense of what civil society means from looking at that. But what's an example of civil society? Yes.
Like a town hall meeting?
Yeah, town hall meeting. Okay. Yeah, yeah, that certainly fits into the atmosphere of what.
Public debates.
I'm sorry.
Public debates.
Public debates. Okay. Televised debates. Yeah, but those are sort of the result of civil society. But from the institutional, organizational point of view, what's an example of civil society? Yes, what's your name? Samantha.
Would lobbyists be considered part of that?
Yeah, some people would say yes. Some people would say no. A lot of people don't like lobbyists, but yeah, you could. I mean, yes, they could be representing a certain group. It could be any type of group. It could be religious, perhaps. It could be industry sector. Yeah, you could put that into that category. Lobbyists, to see.
Germany is pretty good civil society, aren't they?
Germany? Yeah, well, not during the 1920s and 30s, but, yeah, now they do. Yeah, they're a strong civil society. But what are some examples of civil society? Yeah.
I'm not quite sure about this one, but would such organizations as like the Food Safety Commissions that are kind of government-based but are supposed to be protecting the people, are they?
Yeah, they're protecting the people, but you know, they're actually part of the state.
Okay.
So they wouldn't really